The morning air was cold, but she didn't mind it much anymore. The chill had become part of her routine, something that came with the quiet streets and early hours. She sat on the same corner every day, next to a small cafe with fogged-up windows. Her hands were always a little shaky, but when she picked up a brush, everything around her went still. She spread out her small collection of watercolor paintings on an old folding table, each one painted late at night when sleep wouldn't come. The colors were bright and full of life, almost too bright for someone who looked as tired as she did. She had thin cheeks, soft brown eyes, and a kind of calm that came from exhaustion, not peace. Her knit hat covered her short hair, which she kept hidden after the chemo took most of it. People often looked at her, smiled politely, and then kept walking. She didn't blame them. Everyone had their own problems. She looked down at her phone, checking the time. It was just past 8. The cafe was opening, and soon the smell of fresh coffee would fill the air. That smell always gave her hope. Maybe today would be better. Maybe today someone would stop and really look at her art. Each painting had a small handwritten tag beside it. $10, $15, $5 for small sketches. She had once dreamed of showing her work in a gallery, but life had other plans. Now this street corner was her gallery, and the sidewalk was her floor. Behind her chair sat a worn canvas tote filled with supplies, brushes, half-used paints, and a folded hospital letter she couldn't bring herself to read again. It was from the clinic. They had written that her next round of chemotherapy couldn't continue unless she made a payment. She had read that line so many times the words blurred together. That's why she was here. Selling her artwork was the only thing she could do now. She wasn't strong enough for a regular job anymore. Every time she lifted a heavy box or stood too long, her body reminded her of the poison still fighting inside her veins. She picked up one of her paintings, a small scene of a girl sitting under a tree, holding a balloon. The sky was pink and blue with a single cloud drifting across it. She smiled softly, remembering how she painted it after her first chemo session. She had told herself, if I can paint something beautiful, I can survive this. The world was quieter now. She had stopped meeting friends, stopped going out, stopped talking much. Her parents lived far away, and her mother's health wasn't good either. She didn't want to worry them more, so she smiled through the pain, told them she was doing okay, and changed the subject whenever money came up. She had learned to live with little things: warm tea, the sun on her face, the sound of passing cars. She told herself that as long as she could paint, she could still fight. As the morning grew brighter, more people walked by. Office workers, students, tourists. Some slowed down to glance at her paintings, but most were in a rush. She didn't take it personally. People often look, admire, and keep moving. She had done the same once. An older woman stopped for a moment, smiled, and said, "These are lovely, dear. Did you paint them yourself?" She nodded. "Yes, I did. They're beautiful. You've got real talent." The woman's voice was warm, but she didn't buy anything. She gave one last smile and walked away. The girl exhaled softly. Compliments were nice, but they didn't pay for treatment. Still, she whispered, "Thank you," even after the woman was gone. By noon, she had sold only one small postcard for $5. She wrapped it carefully and thanked the buyer with genuine joy, even though her fingers were starting to tremble from the cold. She had a thermos of tea beside her and took small sips to keep her energy up. The pain in her chest had been getting stronger lately, but she ignored it. She couldn't afford another visit to the doctor just yet. A group of teenagers passed by, laughing and taking pictures. One of them pointed at her table and said, "Hey, that's really cool," but didn't stop. The laughter faded as quickly as it came. She looked at her reflection in a puddle near her chair. Her face was pale and the shadows under her eyes looked darker today. Still, there was something soft in her expression. Not sadness, but quiet determination. Inside, she repeated her little promise. Just sell enough for one more treatment. Just keep painting until you get better. She opened her sketchbook and began drawing between customers. The brush moved slowly, but each stroke brought her peace. She painted a small scene of hands holding a flower, fragile but alive. The colors bled together gently, the way watercolors always do, as if the paint itself knew how to feel. Every so often, a gust of wind would lift one of her papers, and she'd reach out quickly to hold it down. Her fingers were stained with paint and a few nails were broken, but her hands were steady. She didn't talk much to anyone, except for the barista from the cafe next door, who sometimes came out to give her leftover muffins at closing time. "You should eat," the barista would say. She'd always smile and promise she would, even when her stomach couldn't handle much. Time passed slowly. The sun shifted, casting long shadows on the pavement. By mid-afternoon, the crowd had thinned and the street became quieter again. She leaned back in her chair and looked at her table. All those colors, all those hours, all that hope. Every painting told a small piece of her story. One was of a mountain she had seen as a child during a family trip. Another was of a window with light spilling through, painted from memory of her old apartment before she had to move out. There was one painting that she kept hidden under the table, wrapped carefully in paper. It was her favorite, a self-portrait she painted during her darkest night. In it, her eyes were tired, but there was a faint light in them. She had called it "Still Fighting." She told herself that when she was better, she'd hang it in her new home, maybe near a window with sunlight streaming in. That thought kept her going when nothing else could. A few people stopped near the end of the day. One man bought a small piece for his daughter. Another just looked and said, "You've got something special here." Each moment of kindness felt like a drop of warmth on a cold day. As the sun began to set, she started packing up her things. Her fingers were stiff from holding the brush all day. The small cash box had only a few bills and coins, not nearly enough. But she tried not to focus on that. She looked at the sky. Streaks of orange and purple mixed together like her paints. It was beautiful, even though the day hadn't gone the way she hoped. She whispered to herself, "Tomorrow will be better." She gathered her paintings carefully, placing each one back into the tote bag. Her body ached as she stood, the weight of the day pressing down on her. Still, she smiled softly. There was always tomorrow. When she turned to leave, the streetlights flickered on one by one. She walked slowly toward the bus stop, holding her bag close. Her reflection passed by the cafe window, and for a brief moment, she saw herself not as a sick girl selling painting, but as an artist, someone who refused to give up. The bus arrived with a soft hiss, and she climbed aboard, finding a seat near the back. She placed her tote on her lap and rested her head against the window. The city lights blurred past like watercolor strokes. Her thoughts drifted between hope and fear, but she clung to hope a little tighter. Somewhere deep down, she believed that something would change, that someone someday would notice not just her art but her story. She closed her eyes and whispered a quiet prayer. Not for miracles, not for fame, just for one more chance to keep fighting. And as the bus rolled through the night, the small bag of paintings sat beside her, filled with more than colors and paper. It held her heart, her struggle, and a promise she refused to break. The next day was warmer. The air carried the smell of rain from the night before, and the streets glistened under the early morning light. She sat in her usual spot with her small table set up neatly, the paintings lined in careful rows. The world around her moved at its usual pace, cars rushing, people chatting on their phones, the coffee shop door swinging open again and again. She watched them quietly as she painted. It helped her forget the ache in her chest. Each stroke of color gave her something to hold on to, something that reminded her she was still here, still fighting. She had sold 2 small paintings yesterday, and that was enough to buy a few groceries. It wasn't much, but it made her feel proud. Every dollar was a small victory, proof that her art mattered, even just a little. Across the street, a man walked hand in hand with a small girl. They looked like they were coming from the park. The girl had pigtails and carried a half-eaten ice cream cone that was melting faster than she could eat it. The man, tall and kind-looking, carried a paper bag of groceries in one arm while holding her hand with the other. The girl laughed as they passed a bakery, pressing her face to the glass for a second before the man gently tugged her away. "Come on, we have to get home," he said softly. "But I just want to look," she said, pouting but smiling anyway. He laughed and gave her a playful look. "You're just like your mom. Always stopping for sweets," the little girl giggled. "You always say that." "I say it because it's true." His voice softened as he said it, though a quiet sadness passed across his face for just a moment. As they walked, the girl suddenly stopped and pointed toward the sidewalk across from them. "Daddy, look!" "The pretty pictures?" He turned his head and saw her, the young woman behind the small table, surrounded by colorful paintings. The girl's excitement made him smile. You like those, huh? They look happy, the girl said. Can we go look, please? He hesitated for a second. Money had been tight lately. After his wife's passing, things had changed. Between rent, school, and groceries, there wasn't much left for extras. But the way his daughter's eyes shone made it hard to say no. All right, he said finally. Just for a minute. They crossed the street carefully, the girl skipping ahead just a little. When they reached the table, she leaned forward, her small fingers pointing at a painting of a tree with colorful leaves. This one's my favorite, she said with a wide smile. The artist looked up, startled at first, but then smiled warmly. You like trees? The little girl nodded. They look like candy, she said, giggling. The man chuckled. That's one way to see it. He looked over the paintings, each one delicate and detailed. They were simple but full of emotion. He could tell each brushstroke had a story behind it. These are beautiful, he said honestly. You painted all of these yourself? She nodded. Yes, I've been painting since I was a kid. The girl kept looking, moving from one painting to another with fascination. Can I hold one, Daddy? The artist smiled and handed her a small postcard-sized painting. It showed a little girl standing under the rain, holding an umbrella made of light. The girl held it carefully, staring at it like it was something magical. It looks like she's not afraid of the rain, she said softly. The man looked at his daughter and then at the artist. You really have a gift, he said. Thank you, she said, lowering her eyes slightly. I just paint what I feel. How much for this one? He asked, pointing to the small piece his daughter was holding. $10, she said quietly. He reached for his wallet. Inside were a few bills, mostly small ones. He hesitated, glancing at his daughter again. Then he pulled out a 20. Keep the change, he said with a kind smile. She looked surprised. Oh, that's too much. It's all right, he replied. It's worth it. Before she could thank him, the girl looked up at her and asked innocently, Did you paint the girl in the rain because you were sad? The question caught her off guard. She smiled faintly, though her eyes softened. Maybe, she said. Sometimes painting helps me feel better when I'm sad. The girl nodded as if she understood completely. That's what I do when I miss Mommy. I draw hearts. The man gently touched his daughter's shoulder, giving her a small nod. He didn't say anything, but his eyes told the rest of the story, one of quiet loss, love, and trying to move forward. The artist's voice softened. That's really beautiful, she said. Your mommy would like that. The little girl smiled and looked down at the painting again. For a moment, none of them spoke. The street noise faded into the background. The man noticed how thin the artist looked, how her hands trembled slightly when she adjusted the stack of paintings. He also saw the hospital bracelet half hidden under her sleeve. His heart sank. He didn't want to make her uncomfortable, so he didn't say anything about it. But it stayed in his mind. When it was time to leave, the girl waved and said, Thank you for the painting. I'm going to hang it by my bed. The artist smiled, truly smiled for the first time that day. Thank you for stopping by, she said. You made my day. As they walked away, the man turned back once. The girl was already sitting again, head bowed slightly as she worked on another piece. Something about her lingered with him. The quiet strength in her movements, the way she smiled despite the sadness behind her eyes. They continued walking home. The girl hummed a small tune, swinging her father's hand as they went. Daddy, she said suddenly, do you think the lady with the pictures has friends? He thought about it. I'm sure she does, he said, though he wasn't certain. She looked lonely, the girl said softly. Maybe we should visit her again. He looked down at his daughter, her heart always open, her words always simple but true. Maybe we will, he said. When they reached home, the girl ran to her room and taped the small painting above her bed. Now she can watch over me when I sleep, she said proudly. He stood in the doorway watching her. The little girl in the painting stood under the rain, her umbrella glowing like light against the gray. There was something hopeful about it, a quiet message hidden inside the colors. Later that night, after the girl had gone to sleep, he sat on the couch with his phone in hand. He kept thinking about the young woman. There was something about her that reminded him of strength, not the loud, obvious kind, but the kind that survives quietly, without anyone noticing. He opened his laptop and searched for local artists. He didn't find her. He tried searching street painter city corner, but nothing came up. Finally, he looked at the painting again. On the bottom right corner in tiny handwriting was her first name and a social media handle. He clicked it in curiosity. Her page was simple, full of photos of her artwork, but also quiet posts about her journey with cancer. She didn't ask for pity, just shared her story honestly. The struggle to afford treatment, the hope that painting gave her, the small moments that kept her going. He scrolled through the comments, a few likes here and there, some words of encouragement, but not many. She was clearly doing everything alone. He sat there for a long time, feeling something stir inside him. He remembered how lost he had felt after his wife passed, how strangers' kindness had helped him through. People had brought meals, offered help, even raised money when he couldn't manage everything himself. And now, seeing this young woman fighting her battle alone, he couldn't shake the feeling that maybe it was his turn to help someone else. He looked at the painting on the wall one more time, the girl standing bravely under the rain, and whispered to himself, "You're right, kiddo. We'll visit her again." The next morning, his daughter was already talking about the art lady as they ate breakfast. "Can we go see her again today? I want to show her my drawing." He smiled. "You made her a drawing?" The girl nodded proudly and held up a crayon picture, two stick figures holding hands under a big rainbow. "It's me and her," she said, "because we're friends now." He looked at the picture for a moment and felt a lump in his throat. He reached over and hugged her. "That's beautiful," he said softly, as they stepped out into the sunlight that morning. He didn't know that what started as a simple stop at a street corner would soon change more than one life. Not just hers, but his and his daughter's too. Sometimes, the smallest moments, a child's curiosity, a kind smile, a painting in the rain, can start something extraordinary. And for the first time in a long time, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. The quiet spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, life was about to bring a little light back into their world. The next morning came with soft sunlight and the smell of fresh bread from the cafe nearby. She sat at her usual corner, setting up her table as always. There was a calm in her movements, the kind that came from habit. Even when her body ached, she moved with care, as if every brush and canvas were pieces of herself. She had learned to be patient. Some days were quiet, some days were kind. Most were in between. But she had stopped expecting miracles long ago. As she arranged her paintings, she noticed the same little girl from the day before walking toward her, holding a man's hand. The girl waved the moment she saw her. "Hi," she shouted cheerfully. The artist blinked in surprise and smiled. "Hi again." "You came back," the girl nodded proudly. "I brought you something." The man walked beside her, smiling a little. "She couldn't stop talking about you all night," he said. The girl opened her backpack and carefully pulled out a small drawing. It was made with crayons, full of bright colors and crooked lines, two stick figures under a rainbow holding hands. "This is you and me," the girl said. "We're friends now." The artist took the drawing gently, her eyes softening. "This is beautiful," she whispered. "Thank you. I love it." The little girl grinned from ear to ear. "You can keep it forever." She nodded. "I will." The man looked at the table and noticed a few new paintings she hadn't displayed the day before. One showed a window with soft light pouring through. Another was of hands reaching toward each other. He could see her world through those colors. Quiet, but filled with emotion. "These are new," he said. She smiled faintly. "I painted them last night. Couldn't sleep, so I painted until morning." He nodded, watching her carefully. She seemed tired, paler than before, but her eyes still held that small spark. The kind of light that doesn't fade easily. The girl pointed at a painting of a blue bird sitting on a branch. "That one looks happy," she said. "That one's called Freedom," the artist replied. "It's about hope." "I like hope," the girl said thoughtfully. "My teacher says hope is when you believe in good things even when they're not here yet." The artist smiled softly. "Your teacher is very wise," the man chuckled. "She repeats everything she learns at school. You should hear her talk about clouds and planets." The girl giggled. "Clouds are just water in the sky," she said proudly, showing off what she knew. They all laughed together, the kind of laughter that felt light and genuine. For a moment the air didn't feel so heavy. The artist reached for a small paper bag and began wrapping one of her postcards. "Here," she said, handing it to the girl. You can take this one as a gift. The girl's eyes widened. Really, but I didn't pay. It's okay, the artist said with a smile. Friends give gifts sometimes, right? The little girl nodded excitedly and held the postcard close to her chest. The man smiled, touched by the kindness. You didn't have to do that, he said. I know, she replied softly. But sometimes giving feels better than selling. He nodded. That's true. They stood there for a few minutes longer, talking about small things, the weather, the girls' school, and how the city always seemed busier on weekends. The man found himself wanting to ask more about her, where she was from, how long she'd been painting, but something held him back. He didn't want to intrude, still. He noticed the small details. The hospital bracelet hidden beneath her sleeve again, the fatigue in her eyes, the way she rubbed her arm absent-mindedly like she was trying to ease a pain she didn't talk about. He thought about how unfair life could be sometimes. Eventually, he said, We should get going. But I'm glad we saw you again. The little girl waved. We'll come back again soon. As they walked away, the artist looked down at the crayon drawing still in her hand. The two stick figures smiled beneath the rainbow. She felt her throat tighten with emotion. It had been so long since someone had given her something with pure kindness. For the rest of the day, she kept that drawing propped up beside her paints. Every time she looked at it, she smiled. Later that evening, the man sat at home after dinner, scrolling through his phone. His daughter was playing in her room, humming softly. He opened the social media page of the artist again, the same one he had found the night before. Her latest post was from a week ago. It read, Selling my artwork at the corner again tomorrow. Every piece helps me pay for my treatment. Thank you to everyone who believes in small miracles. There was a picture of her smiling, holding one of her paintings. Her caption ended with a small heart emoji. He stared at the photo for a long time. He remembered how she looked when he saw her today, the faint tremble in her hands, the tired eyes. She was fighting quietly and no one seemed to notice. He clicked through a few more posts. In one, she mentioned the hospital. In another, she wrote about how she paints when she feels too weak to get out of bed. Each post felt like a piece of a bigger story, one of courage, silence, and hope. He leaned back on the couch, deep in thought. His daughter's laughter echoed from her room. It reminded him of the months after his wife passed away, the struggle, the nights when everything felt heavy, and how strangers had helped them get through. He thought about what that kindness had meant back then. Maybe it was time to pass it on. The next morning, he woke up early. While his daughter was still asleep, he sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and opened his laptop. He started typing slowly, hesitating at first, unsure how to begin. Finally, he wrote, There's a young woman in our city who sells her paintings on a street corner to pay for her chemotherapy. Her art is full of life and hope, even though she's fighting for her own. My daughter and I met her yesterday. She gave us kindness when she had so little left to give. I think it's time the world gave some back. He attached a picture of one of her paintings, the one he had bought, and added the link to her small art page. Then he clicked post. He didn't expect much, but something about her story touched people. The post started getting shared, first by a few local friends, then by strangers. Comments began to flood in. This is beautiful. How can we help? What's her name? I'd love to buy a painting. Praying for her strength. By evening, hundreds of people had seen it. Some even started sending messages asking if they could donate directly for her treatment. He couldn't believe it. He showed his daughter the growing post and she clapped her hands with excitement. Daddy, look! Everyone wants to help her. He smiled. Yeah, they do. That evening, they walked to her corner again. She was there, as always, packing up her things as the sun began to set. She looked surprised when she saw them. You came again, she said, smiling. The little girl ran up and hugged her legs. We missed you! The artist laughed softly, caught off guard, but clearly moved. I missed you too. The man stepped forward, holding an envelope in his hand. I need to show you something, he said gently. She looked confused. What is it? He handed her the envelope. Inside were printed pages, screenshots of the post he made, filled with hundreds of kind comments and messages from strangers offering help. She stared at them in disbelief. What is this? It's people who saw your story, he said. They want to help. The post went everywhere. Donations are already coming in. You'll be able to pay for your treatment." Her mouth fell open slightly. For a moment, she didn't speak. Her eyes glistened as she looked at him, then at the little girl beside him. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why would you do this?" He smiled softly. "Because someone once did it for us." Tears rolled down her cheeks before she could stop them. She covered her mouth with her hand, trying to keep quiet, but her emotions overflowed. "I don't know what to say," she said in a trembling voice. "You don't have to say anything," he replied. "Just keep painting." The little girl hugged her again. "Now you don't have to be sad anymore," she said with childlike honesty. The artist knelt down and hugged her back tightly, tears falling freely now. "Thank you," she whispered. "You have no idea what this means to me." That night when she got home, she opened her phone and saw the post for herself. Thousands of people had liked, shared, and commented. Some wrote that they were inspired by her art. Others said they were sending prayers, love, and donations. She sat on her bed, her paintings surrounding her, and cried quietly, not out of fear or pain this time, but out of pure gratitude. For the first time in months, she felt like she wasn't fighting alone, and outside the night sky glowed faintly with stars, like tiny brushstrokes of light, the kind she always painted when she needed hope the most. The next few days felt like a dream she didn't want to wake up from. Every time she opened her phone, she saw new messages, new comments, and words of love from people she had never met. The post that the kind man had written had spread far beyond what anyone expected. Thousands of strangers shared it, and her small art page turned into a wave of kindness. People from different cities and even other countries wrote to her. Some said her art reminded them of their own battles. Others sent small donations or asked how they could buy her paintings. She couldn't believe it. For so long she had felt invisible. She had painted on that corner day after day, wondering if anyone ever truly saw her. And now, suddenly, the world did. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages, but one stood out from the hospital. It was from her doctor's office. "We've received a payment on your account. You can continue your treatment as soon as you're ready." Her hands trembled as she read it again and again. It didn't feel real. The weight she had carried for so long, the fear, the exhaustion, the quiet nights wondering how much time she had left, it began to lift. She pressed her hands over her mouth, trying not to cry, but the tears came anyway, happy tears this time. When she finally sat down to paint that day, the colors looked brighter than ever. She mixed her paints with care, feeling lighter than she had in months. She painted a sunrise, soft pinks and golds, with a figure standing at the edge of a hill, watching the light break through. She called it New Beginning. Later that afternoon, she decided to go to the corner again. She wanted to thank people in person, even if they were just strangers passing by. When she arrived, the man and his little girl were already there. The girl waved the moment she saw her. "You're famous now," she shouted. The man laughed softly. "She's been watching your videos all morning. People are sharing them everywhere." The artist smiled shyly. "I don't even know how to feel." "It's also unreal," he nodded. "You deserve it. You've inspired a lot of people." She looked at him, her eyes glistening again. "You don't understand what you did for me. I was losing hope. I didn't think anyone would care." He shook his head. "People care more than you think. Sometimes they just need to be reminded." The little girl tugged on her sleeve. "Did you get better now?" she asked with innocent eyes. The artist knelt down and smiled softly. "Not yet, but I can keep trying now." "That's good," the girl said happily, "because I still have more drawings to give you." They all laughed, and for the first time in a long time, the laughter felt easy and free. The three of them sat together for a while. The man bought another painting, even though she tried to refuse his money. He insisted, saying, "You're not taking charity. You're sharing beauty." The girl helped her arrange the paintings on the table, pointing out her favorites. She loved the bright ones, the ones full of skies, flowers, and dreams. While they were talking, an older woman stopped by. "Are you the young artist from the internet?" she asked. The artist blushed and nodded. "I saw your story online," the woman said warmly. "You've touched a lot of hearts, dear. I wanted to come meet you in person." She bought 2 paintings without even asking the price. More people came after that. Some bought art. Some just wanted to say hello. One man dropped a folded note into her donation box that read, "Your courage gives others strength." The world that had once felt so big and lonely suddenly felt full of kindness. By the end of the day, her table was nearly empty. She packed up slowly, looking around at the faces of people who waved and smiled as they passed. As the sun set, she turned to the man and said quietly, "I don't think I'll ever be able to thank you enough." He smiled. "You already have," she tilted her head. "How?" "You reminded me what hope looks like," he said. "After my wife passed, I forgot. I've been just getting by. But seeing you fight every day, it reminded me that life still has color." She looked at him, her heart softening. "You helped me find my color again, too." The little girl looked between them, confused but happy. "Can we all paint together one day?" They both laughed. "Yes," the artist said. "I'd like that." That night when she went home, she set the little girl's drawing on her table beside the new painting, the one of the sunrise. They looked perfect together, like pieces of one story. She sat by the window and looked out at the city lights. For the first time, she didn't feel afraid of tomorrow. She thought about all the people who had reached out, all the messages that said, "You're not alone." Maybe that was the real miracle, like not just the money, but the reminder that she was part of something bigger than herself. In the days that followed, her story appeared on local news channels. Reporters came to interview her, and she always spoke with humility. "I'm not special," she would say. "I just paint what I feel." I think people connected because everyone has something they're fighting for. Every interview, every message, every handshake reminded her that kindness still existed in the world. Meanwhile, the man and his daughter visited her often. They brought her tea, small gifts, and laughter. The girl liked to sit beside her and paint her own pictures. Sometimes they would sit quietly for hours, just painting side by side. It became their little routine. One afternoon, the girl proudly handed her a painting she had made all by herself, a picture of 3 people holding hands under a rainbow. "That's you, me, and Daddy," she said. "We're all happy now." The artist smiled, tears forming again. "It's perfect," the man laughed softly. "She's got your touch." "Look at those colors," the girl puffed out her chest. "I'm an artist now, too." They all laughed, and the sound carried through the gentle afternoon breeze. As weeks passed, the artist began her new round of treatment. It wasn't easy. The pain came and went, the fatigue lingered. But this time she didn't feel hopeless. Every time she walked into the hospital, she remembered the faces of the people who had helped her get there. On the hardest days, she thought about the little girl and her father, waiting for her on the corner, cheering her on. One night, after a particularly rough day, she opened her phone to see a new message. It was from the man. He had sent a picture of his daughter's room. The wall was now covered with colorful paintings, including the very first one they bought from her. The message read, "Your art reminds us to smile every day." "Thank you." She stared at the photo for a long time, then smiled through tears. She replied, "You and your daughter saved me more than you'll ever know." Life slowly began to settle into something new. Her health improved little by little. Her strength returned. The doctors told her she was responding well, and hope began to bloom again, steady and strong. She started teaching small art classes for children at a local community center. She wanted to give back, to create a space where kids could paint their feelings the way she once did. The little girl was her first student, of course, proudly showing her drawings to everyone. The man would stop by after work to pick her up, always smiling as he watched them. One evening, as the class ended and the sun began to fade, the artist sat outside with her paints. The man joined her quietly. "You've come a long way," he said softly. She nodded. "We both have." He looked at her for a moment. "Funny, isn't it? You were painting to survive, and somehow your art helped me start living again." She looked down, smiling faintly. "Maybe that's what art does. It heals everyone who touches it, even the one who makes it." They sat together in silence, watching the sky turn orange and pink. The little girl ran around chasing butterflies nearby, her laughter echoing across the small park. For a moment, it felt like everything in the world was right where it should be. When it was time to leave, the artist packed up her brushes and looked at them both. "Thank you," she said again, her voice soft but sure. "For everything," the man smiled. "You don't have to thank us anymore." But she shook her head. "No, I do. Because you didn't just help me with money, you gave me back my faith." He nodded quietly, understanding every word. As they walked away, she turned back to the empty table that had once been her lifeline. It wasn't just a street corner anymore. It was where everything had changed. She picked up one of her last paintings, the one she had been saving. It showed a figure standing on a hill, holding hands with a child, both looking at a sunrise together. She smiled softly. She already knew what she would call it, still fighting. The months that followed felt like the start of a new chapter. The days didn't feel as heavy anymore, and every sunrise felt like a small victory. Her body was still healing, but her heart felt full. Every morning she woke up with a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. The little apartment that had once felt cold and empty now felt alive with color. Paintings covered the walls, flowers sat by the window, and light poured through like it was finally finding its way back home. She had started teaching art classes 3 times a week at the community center. The classes were small at first. A few children, a couple of adults, and some parents who just wanted a place to breathe for an hour. But word spread quickly. People came not just to learn painting, but to feel what she made others feel. Calm, hope, and connection. She never charged much. Sometimes, when she knew someone couldn't afford it, she told them, "Just bring a smile. That's enough." The little girl and her father still visited every week. The girl had become her shadow, always eager to paint, always full of questions. She had a habit of talking nonstop while painting, her words mixing with the colors on the paper. "Do you think clouds get tired?" she'd ask one day. "Maybe," the artist would reply, laughing softly. "But they always come back, don't they?" Another day, she'd say, "Do you think dreams live inside paintings?" "Maybe," she'd answer again, smiling. "Maybe that's where they hide until someone finds them." The father often sat quietly in the corner during those classes, watching them both. He never said much, but his smile said everything. Sometimes after class, they'd all walk to the park together. The little girl would run ahead, chasing pigeons or picking up flowers while the 2 adults followed behind slowly, talking about life, art, and how quickly time was passing. One afternoon, while sitting on a bench watching the sunset, he turned to her and said softly, "You've changed a lot since that day we first met." She smiled faintly. "I guess I had to. Life doesn't always give you easy choices." He nodded. "You've made something beautiful out of pain." She looked down for a moment. "I think we both did," she said. "You turned your pain into love for your daughter. I turned mine into colors. Maybe that's what healing is, and turning something broken into something new." He didn't say anything for a while. He just looked at her, the fading light reflecting in his eyes. "I think you're right," he said finally. When they got up to leave, the little girl came running toward them holding 2 flowers. "One for you," she said, handing one to her father. "And one for you," she told the artist. The artist smiled, tucking the flower into her hair. "Thank you, sunshine," the girl beamed. "You look happy," she said simply. "I am," the artist replied, "for the first time in a long time." That night, she sat at her desk and began working on a new painting. It was of a girl standing on a hill under a sky full of stars, holding a paintbrush like a light. In the distance, she painted 2 smaller figures, a man and a child, walking toward her. When she finished, she looked at it for a long time. It wasn't just a painting. It was a story, their story. She decided to name it "The Painting That Saved Us." The next day, she brought it to the community center and hung it on the wall. When the little girl saw it, her eyes lit up. "That's us," she said excitedly. The artist nodded with a smile. "It is. You helped me find the light again." The father stood beside them, looking at the painting quietly. "It's beautiful," he said softly. "You've captured everything, hope, love, and life." She looked at him, her eyes gentle. "You gave me all 3. As weeks passed, her art began to travel beyond the city. A small gallery reached out to her after seeing her story online. They wanted to showcase her work in an exhibition called Colors of Courage. She hesitated at first, and she wasn't used to attention, but the father and daughter encouraged her. "You have to do it," the man said. "The world should see what hope looks like." The little girl nodded eagerly. "We'll come too. I'll wear my rainbow dress." The night of the exhibition arrived, and the room was filled with people. Strangers, friends, reporters, and even doctors from her hospital. Her paintings lined the walls, each one telling a part of her journey, from darkness to light, from pain to peace. When she walked into the room, applause filled the air. She felt overwhelmed but grateful. She wasn't used to being the center of attention. All she had ever wanted was to survive, to live another day, to paint another picture. And now here she was, alive, standing among her dreams. The father and daughter stood in the front row, smiling proudly. The little girl waved and shouted, "That's my friend!" which made everyone laugh warmly. The artist took a deep breath before speaking. "I never thought I'd be here," she began. "There was a time I didn't think I'd live to see another sunrise. But then something happened. A stranger stopped by my little table one day and reminded me that kindness still exists in this world. He and his daughter changed everything for me." She paused, her voice shaking slightly. "This art, this night, it's not just mine. It belongs to everyone who believed in hope when it was hard to find, to everyone who reminded me that love is stronger than fear." There was quiet in the room for a moment, and then the applause came again, louder this time. After the event, people came up to her to congratulate her, to share their own stories, to thank her for giving them hope. Some said they started painting again because of her. Others said her words had helped them through dark times. She realized then that her pain hadn't been wasted. It had turned into something powerful, something that connected people. When the night ended, the man and his daughter walked her home. The little girl was holding her hand, swinging it playfully as they walked. "You were amazing," she said. "Thank you," the artist replied softly. "I couldn't have done it without you two." The man smiled. "You've come full circle." "Maybe," she said. "But I think this is just the beginning." When they reached her building, the little girl hugged her tightly. "Don't stop painting," she said. "The world needs your colors." The artist smiled and hugged her back. "And the world needs your kindness." After they left, she stood at her window for a long time looking at the city lights. They shimmered like stars, reflecting on the glass like tiny reminders of everything she had been through. She thought about the girl's words. "The world needs your colors," she whispered to herself. "Maybe that's my purpose now." The days turned into weeks and the weeks into months. Life didn't suddenly become perfect, but it became meaningful. Her treatments ended successfully. Her health stabilized. She still had tired days, but they didn't scare her anymore. Her little art studio grew busier. People came not just to buy her paintings, but to feel what they represented: resilience, love, and new beginnings. She started a small foundation called Art for Hope, helping other patients sell their handmade artwork to support their treatments. It grew faster than she ever imagined. Schools, hospitals, and community centers joined in, turning it into something beautiful. A chain of kindness that kept spreading. Whenever she visited the hospital now, she didn't go as a patient. She went as a teacher, carrying brushes and paints, helping others find color in their pain. The father and daughter continued to visit often. The girl had her own little art corner in the studio now. Her drawings had improved so much that one of her pieces, a bright picture of 3 people standing under a rainbow, became the foundation's logo. One afternoon, as the artist looked at that logo printed on the wall, she smiled. It was the same image the girl had drawn for her all those months ago. The same simple message, that love could heal anything. Years later, people still talked about her story, not because she was famous, but because it reminded them of something real. A girl who sold paintings to survive had ended up painting hope into countless lives. One small act of kindness had started it all. Sometimes she still went to that same corner where it began. She didn't sell art there anymore. She just sat for a while, remembering. The sound of the city, the smell of coffee, the spot where everything changed. She'd smile and whisper, "Thank you." Because in the end, it wasn't just about survival. It was about finding beauty in the hardest places, about people who showed up when you least expected it, and about learning that kindness, no matter how small, can change everything. And every time she picked up her brush, she painted the same feeling again and again, not sadness, not struggle, but quiet, steady hope. That was her story, that was her masterpiece.